Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Roleplay Chat. I'm Matt, a game master who can't stop talking about role-playing games. Today in Roleplay Chat, we're going to be talking about the use of music in your game, whether that be the kind of tools you might need to create and compose your own music, whether that be incorporating existing sounds and music into your game, or even just advice and strategies on kind of integrating existing media into your game. It's a really awesome conversation. But before we do that, I did want to apologize. I didn't get a chance to record an indie showcase segment for this episode. Unfortunately, it kind of got away from me. I have some indie content and some games that were provided to me by some of the indie publishers in the space, but I just didn't get a chance to play them. So to make sure that I give them the right time and opportunity to shine, I'm going to defer that to next episode. Kind of as a consolation, I decided to give the extended episode to all listeners. So today's episode would be the extended episode for Patreon subscribers. But just because I didn't get a chance to do the indie showcase, instead we're going to have the big long episode with the extended cut. So this kind of gives you the opportunity to see what Patreon subscribers would be receiving every single time an episode is released. So I hope that might give you the incentive to go back and take a look at subscribing to the Patreon if you aren't already. But anyway, yeah, let's dive right into the show, and I hope you enjoy it. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Roleplay Chat. I'm Matt, a game master who can't stop talking about role-playing games. And today on Roleplay Chat, we're going to be exploring music in tabletop role-playing games. And I am very excited to be talking to one of my first, I think I can call you a Threads friend. I'm not sure, but I think I could call you a Threads friend.
Yeah.
Ever since the X Exodus, making some friends over on Threads. It's a good space. So yeah, today we're joined by a writer, a game master, and a music composer with credits in many actual plays and other tabletop RPG related media, including That Dark Academia, Questline Virtual Tabletop, the Sirenscapes, Out on a Limb Cyberpunk Actual Play podcast. Please join me in welcoming Aiden Chan to Roleplay Chat. You may know them as the Dungeon Maestro.
Yeah,
Aiden,
hey.
welcome to Roleplay Chat.
It's great to be here. I'm super stoked actually.
Awesome. I'm really stoked too. Music is, I think, sometimes the unsung hero of a tabletop role-playing game. Pun intended there. So I'm really excited, Aiden, to talk to you about music and games today. Games, specifically role-playing games. But
Right.
hey, if you have anecdotes in other parts of the world of the hobby, don't hesitate to
Oh,
to
don't put
go
me on the
there.
spot. That's why when I write, I am a chronic plotter, so I can go over and correct myself over and over again. There's
Uh,
no improv bones in this guy.
yeah. Well, then in that case, maybe we'll stick to the script that you said you didn't prepare for, but maybe secretly you did. But no, I'm
Oh,
just teasing. Yeah. So let's talk about music and role play games.
yeah.
And Aiden, the plan, the hope is to kind of cover three main pillars in today's conversation.
Mhm.
The first is just to kind of get a sense of your creative process as it pertains to creating and crafting music.
Yeah.
Then I'm hoping to talk a little bit about kind of advice that you might have for incorporating music into the games that we run, whether those be actual play shows
Mhm.
or just a home game, with your
Yeah.
friends around a table at home. Um, and then last but not least, some, tools, resources, things that you could recommend for people looking to explore this part of the hobby. Does that
Yeah,
sound like a,
100%.
a plan?
I love that. Love that. Let's dig in.
Let's do it. Let's do it. So, why don't you start us off by talking to us a little bit about some of your favorite projects that you've worked on in the TTRPG space?
Ooh, okay. That's a hard question because I've done so many. That's said, I'm just casually looking through my catalog here real quick, and honestly, of course, the cheesy answer is like all of them are my babies, but I can definitively say that there are a few of them that have definitely stood out just because they were a different kind of challenge for me. Um, just kind of going off of recency here, um, the project that I am currently still working on, but close to completing, for Infinite Stories, which is also a Threads friend. Um,
Awesome, awesome.
yeah, um, but it's an up and coming like art search engine is my understanding of it. It uses kind of like the first half of what we, the general public, know as the process that makes up AI, right?
Hmm.
But it's non-generative, so it takes like all the algorithms that we like associate with generative AI, and it uses that in order to like scan artwork that has been willingly provided by artists and musicians and
Hmm.
writers. So when, for example, you're a DM or a player and you're like, "Hey, I need art," and so, all of a sudden in the middle of a thing, like, and you search it, right? It doesn't go off of keywords. It just goes off of like phrase or I'm not doing, how eloquently it was put to me justice. But it goes off of that, and then it can literally just like scan like a piece of art, and it like like blue elf sword. Like
Hmm.
it'll
Hmm.
literally find those pieces. Anyway, so um I did some promotional soundtrack for its for the platform's marketing material, as well as its in-house TTRPG setting.
Cool.
Still completing that, but that said, the main theme that I did, um, the prompt I was given was it can go beyond fantasy, so I was instantly like, "Yo, let's do some League of Legends style, you know, full orchestra, but with a trap beat music, right?"
Nice. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So that
yeah.
one's really like near and dear to my heart. Like it got me to merge a lot of skill sets that I would otherwise need to separate, and I got to combine them into one giant musical cake. And
Very
I
cool. That's really cool. Yeah,
yeah,
it's fun when you get the opportunity to like you're saying, flex different muscles within the same
mhm,
context.
mhm. Oh, this was a
Um,
full body workout, and
yeah,
yeah, you don't
yeah,
get a
that
lot of
sounds
those opportunities. You know what I mean? There's always it's either upper body or leg day. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying?
that's it. That's why you separate it out by day, right? Because
Yep,
usually that's how it has to go.
yep, yep.
That sounds cool, and that sounds like a cool tool too. I really I think AI. Not to get into a conversation about AI
Yeah,
in our space, but
right.
I think it's here to stay. It's just finding ways for AI to be respectful of the
Yes, yes,
creators, right? And like you're saying, having a
yeah,
tool where people willingly submit their content,
exactly.
that is
Yeah,
a responsible way, I
yeah,
think, of using
exactly.
AI.
And the really
Really,
cool
really
thing
neat.
about Infinite Stories was when it was pitched to me, the art database that they were using was all like um what's the word, like royalty free slash
Oh,
historical
like
art,
Creative Commons
Creative
stuff.
Commons and
Cool.
historical art. So it's like they were training using like actually ethically sourced pieces
Hmm.
as
Hmm.
opposed to other platforms stealing, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, that
basically.
was a major green flag for me. And yeah, it's just cool to be part of something so groundbreaking like that.
But I will say, Aiden, it's
Yeah.
definitely cool, and I think it must have been pretty cool too to be working on some big names, right? Like you had the opportunity to work for some Sirenscape related projects, and
Yes, yes,
Sirenscape is a huge name in the
it
TTRPG
is.
space.
It is. I was Yeah, yeah, it was incredible. I was surprised to get the call. Actually, it was my friend. Um, we we've kind of fallen out, not like in a bad way, just like we lost touch, but
Hmm.
because she's still on X and I'm on Threads. But for anyone who is listening and you need someone new to follow, um the Opera Geek on X
Cool.
is an incredible performer. She's classically trained, operatic singer, incredible voice. But she plays TTRPGs, and um, she's been around for she's a pillar in the community, honestly. But yeah, she at that point we had known each other for a little bit, interacted quite a bit, and yeah, like I guess when the project came up, she thought of me and threw my name in the ring, and then yeah, I got the email, and I like it. She had me at Cyberpunk because
Hmm.
one, I was already pumped. It was right around when the video game 2077 was coming out, so I was already pumped.
Yeah,
Two, I
that
had
was the
already known
stone.
about Cyberpunk, the board game, the TTRPG, the OG, right? So, and I've been meaning to play Cyberpunk Red, but like I was like, oh my God, this is the sort of quote unquote official.
Hmm.
Don't quote me on that, but official AP for Cyberpunk Red. So I'm just like, yeah, hell yeah, I'll do it. That was an incredible experience. It was honestly one of my first times do like prior to that I've done like EDM and sort of like synthwave on my own, but they were just kind of like pet projects. They were never like paid gigs or for
Hmm.
anything in the space. um I'd done some conceptual work for like commercials before, but none of them were ever options. They were just just to give the producers some juice. That said, this was the first one that was ever gonna see the limelight, straight through production, everything. So I was like, yeah, I'm doing it. And yeah, like it was the prompt was to do themes for each character. And so that's what I did. And there was, I believe, 5 PCs. Yeah, it allowed me to really work those muscles. That was like I would even call it my first workout in EDM. And it's
Cool,
like
man. Man.
serious workout in EDM. And yeah, so yeah, it was incredible to kind of explore every single character, utilize different soundscapes, different combinations of synths, types of synths, different like drum beats. And I had so much fun doing that even after it was said and done, it was like maybe 3 episodes in,
Hmm.
and spoiler alert, the characters were visiting a location in Night City, called Heaven, which is like this, think Judge Dredd, big slum tower, right?
Hmm.
And
Cool.
it's the way the GM described it was so like Chinese influenced that I was like, oh, I gotta write it. So I wrote a full like 5.5, 6 minute EDM track with like Chinese instruments, but also like Japanese instruments, taiko drums, and then synths, the whole shebang. And then they
That
ended up
sounds
using
awesome.
that for their second season, or no, it wasn't a second season. It was a different series by the same people. They
Yeah,
use that as the title sequence music.
very
And
cool.
hey, that was pro bono, but I was just like, I'm happy to do it. That was so, yeah. So all that to say, I had an incredible time.
Yeah, sounds like it. And for you to, remember it so vividly
Hmm.
speaks to
Yeah,
that experience.
yeah, 100%.
Um, if we could extract a little bit,
Yeah,
and maybe take a step back, Aiden, could you talk to us a little bit about what your process is like
yeah,
when you're creating music for TTRPG projects
100%.
specifically? Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
100%.
that could be neat to explore that.
If you asked me this question like 10 years ago, which was when I truly started, back then it was like for friends and stuff, but I would have had a very different answer. Hell, even like 4 years ago, like when COVID hit and everyone
Mm,
was like exploring TTRPGs, I would have had a different answer. Now, having composed so many commissions. I'm a lot more, I wouldn't say jaded. I'm just a lot more seasoned. So my answer is this: it depend. You will have heard of this answer a lot, and so I hate to be a cliche, but it depends on the project.
Hmm.
I will say this much. We can boil it down to the type of project, obviously. So, like, whether it's character themes, actual play or podcast, title, music, or ambiance, and kind of piggybacking off of character themes, it can also be like locations. So I would categorize it as those three. Those three are kind of like my bread and butter, or four. I'm not good at math. That's why I'm a
Yeah,
musician. Okay.
characters, locations, and titles. That's.
Titles
Was
and
there another one?
ambiance.
Oh, and
Ambiance.
ambiance. Ambiance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So with characters and locations, they're pretty similar. Usually when I get a client or if I'm doing something as a giveaway, I will ask the person, my main point of contact, like, hey, can you give me a character profile or give me some information about the location? Like important people, important landmarks, a little bit of history, that kind of thing. For characters, it'd be like backstory,
Yeah.
appearance,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that kind of thing. That said, I will typically when I receive these like little packets, the person will pepper it with very useful tidbits. Whether it's like, oh, this is a half elf barbarian. Um, and here's the character art, and as you can see, very heavily Celtic inspired. Cool, great, I got you right. Bagpipes, bodhran, and right, you know what I mean? Um,
Yeah.
uh, uh,
Yeah. There's a
yeah.
couple of dead giveaways for sure.
Or like, it's like, hey, I'm playing a dragon wizard, but like I've been very heavily influenced by like um first century Middle Eastern or Levantine culture, that kind of thing. Then I'm like, oh, great, like a duduk or maybe an oud, that kind of like instantly
Hmm.
I'm like
Hmm.
picking it apart, quantifying each thing as like a potential instrument, that kind of thing. Right. So that's usually the first step. And same with like AP or podcast themes or ambiance. It's usually just my first step is from the prompt, glean keywords from
Yeah.
it. Like, does this need to be chill? Does this need to be combat-ish, combat oriented? Does this need to have full orchestra, chamber orchestra, percussion, ethnic? Whatever I can glean out of it, that's what
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
doing. Once I've done that, we go on to the second step, and that's usually dependent on the client's budget. But operating, just for the sake of this interview, operating on the assumption that budget is not an issue, we would then go and decide, hey, this and again, I'm not one of those people that is always going to try to upsell you on like full orchestra, because like sometimes it just doesn't need it. Sometimes a piano is all that's needed, right? So
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
always gonna I'm just gonna suggest like, hey, this is what I think the instrumentation should be. Is this in line with what you were thinking? Sometimes I have clients that tell me straight up like, I really thought I really think that maybe like an oboe melody would go really well, and I'll be like, great, I'll work off of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Because that's what
but yeah,
they presumably want, I guess.
exactly. Exactly. But if it's like left up to me, then I piece together that, like the instrumentation, and then I suggest it to them. 9.9 times out of 10, they just go, yes, let's do it. Perfect. Great. And so we get started. The next step is usually just kind of dependent on budget, but if we're operating
Hmm.
on no budget, then we I operate on kind of like industry standards in terms of length of time. So, for
Yeah.
example, like a TTRP, not TTRP, all these acronyms, AP or podcast intro, is typically going to be anywhere from 30 seconds to 90 seconds, right?
Hmm.
I err on the longer side, especially for like streams, just because a lot of the clients that I have are also their own editors. They're also, or uh, and our generation especially, right? We're quite cinematically literate. Not the same as being
Hmm.
media literate, but cinematically literate. I always err on the 90 seconds for those just because it's like that's the usual standard length for a TV intro
Yeah.
title sequence. And people editing like their intro sequences are probably gonna be editing around that length anyway. So for intros, that's usually the length. For character themes, again, I typically, I enforce my minimum of like a minute because the cost of production for anything less than a minute is pretty much the same as a minute. So I'm just like, just do the minute.
Yeah,
You'll get
might as
extra
well get
music.
them in.
You might as well
Yeah.
get exactly. But that said, um, uh, um, with character themes, it usually ranges from anywhere from a minute to about 3.5. So like a standard song. For those pieces, I will block off the chunks that I know are needed in a song. So like there needs to be an introduction and a section with the primary intro of the thematic material, and then a developmental section. Then we go right back to and recapitulate that theme.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, right. Any classical nerds that are listening, that's the tertiary ABA form. Anyway, um,
Yeah,
for
yeah, yeah.
ambiances, or anything that is scored to moment. So if there's any um, like for example, if I'm scoring for an animatic, or if I'm scoring for a DM's monologue that they have practiced and have timed down to the second, right? I've done those. Um, in that case, then I am blocking off the scripted moments
Mm.
of the quote unquote cinematic. So it's like, okay, you know, uh, page blah to blah is this many takes this many minutes, or this many seconds, blah to blah, etc.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right.
So
So I'm
it's
blocking
really
off those
like
moments.
it's blocked off, like you're
Yeah.
saying.
It's
It
like film
goes
scoring.
with.
Yep.
That's exactly it. Yeah,
Yep. That's
cool.
like film scoring. And then yeah. So and then sometimes with ambiance, actually, like if they're like, hey, I need a 10-minute piece. Um, Those ones, I asked them to just give me their DM notes. I promise to anyone listening that I do not steal your ideas when I DM myself, but that said, I still require the DM notes. Why? Because like I want to put as many Easter eggs in there as possible. Even if we're dealing with like if it's like a really tight budget and we're just dealing with 3 instruments, which is, my lowest tier, but like there's a lot you can do musically,
Hmm.
um, and subliminally, and so I want to do as much as I can with the limited resources that I have. Um, so yeah, that's step two, and then step three is really just starting,
Yeah.
um, because I blocked certain moments off. I already know in my head ahead of time, like this portion here, I know strings intro. Let me build out the texture. And then I know the next portion is going to have brass in the melody. So let me go ahead and tease the brass a little bit in the intro, just kind of get it from nothing and crescendo that. And then boom, right at when the brass come in, that's when they have their moment there. And then, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm already road mapping. I'm like 10 steps ahead as I'm
Yeah.
clicking the notes into my DAW. Which if there's any audio production nerds that are listening, I use Logic Pro X. Okay. Um,
But
uh,
yeah, that's really cool, Aiden. And I actually, I really, really appreciate. Even, like, I don't know
good.
anything about making music, but I really, really appreciate how when you're, you're blocking off the time of the song, or you're thinking up your theme, that
Hmm.
you're leaving space for the thematic, but
Yeah.
also for the character to be ambiguous enough that they still shine through, or for
Yeah.
the game master's notes, for the impact to
Hmm.
come in when they're
Hmm.
giving that monologue.
Yep.
um it was something that I think, like, when I think about music in a role-playing game,
Hmm.
it's very rarely music. Almost like,
Hmm.
I feel like it's often like ambient stuff that I can
Yeah.
find to help
Yeah.
set a tone. But there's no doubt in my mind that curated music
Mm.
is gonna increase the elevation of like the audience's immersion and
Yeah.
the impact that everything is gonna have when you have
Yeah.
something that's curated so specifically like your crafting.
Hmm.
So that's super cool. I like really
I
really neat.
appreciate it. It's why I do what I do, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I'd be curious to know like because when I think about music in general,
Yeah.
it it's often telling us a story, right? Like
Hmm.
a song
Oh yeah.
is telling us a story, whether
Yeah.
there's vocals or not.
Hmm.
It can be evocative, it can be powerful.
Hmm.
I'd be curious to know when you're creating music, how
Hmm.
do you balance like the piece's story
Hmm.
with the story that's gonna come in the role playing game? Because like
Yeah.
that's gonna evolve and should kind of be its own thing too.
Yeah.
How do you
100%.
marry those things together?
Um, I will say one of it depends on the client that I have, but uh, if I get a vibe from a client that they really care about the focus being on the players and not stealing their thunder, then I always drop this disclaimer, and that is like, one, yo, I totally get it. Two, like, yeah, I believe music in TTRPGs, while it's cool to have an environment, a sonic environment and an immersion, um, what's the words I'm looking for? That is reminiscent of, for example, playing a video game or
Mhm.
watching a really good show or movie. Um, the inherent nature of TTRPG kind of disallows that because there's so much more. We're almost, when we're playing, we're almost operating on the script level, right?
Yeah,
If you really think
yeah.
about it, you're in the writer's room, basically. So, in order to facilitate that, I always say, hey, I know I'm asking a lot of details from you. Let me just say on the out front that probably only going to be using about 5% of this. Okay. But I'm
Mhm.
going to be using the most important pieces, but 5% nonetheless. Why? Because, again, most of the storytelling is going to be told on the table
Yeah.
between the players, between you. Um, but the music is just there to kind of either fill in gaps or maybe remind people of certain things in a more subtle way. So for example, like um I'm classically trained, and I never I, I never drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak, with 20th century experimental music. I went full into like uh 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 romantic music, Dvorak, Brahms, Beethoven, like late Beethoven, and then shot off with like neoclassical, like Stravinsky and Wagner and all that, right? All the way through like American march music, Sousa, and then into like John Williams, and then film soundtrack, right? The rest is history.
Mhm,
Y'all know
mhm.
the rest. That said, I have a tendency to use a lot of light motifs, which is those little musical stingers, that you sometimes hear, like, the rest of the orchestra is doing something else, and then suddenly the trombone is just going boom, 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 right? Oh
Mhm.
shit, Darth Vader's doing something. You know what I mean? Um, so like
Totally.
I
Yeah, yeah.
like doing stuff like that. And so I do stuff like that to kind of um help call back to, for example, if I'm in the development section of a song, so the middle portion, right? I might have introduced a secondary theme to maybe talk about this other part of a character's backstory, or
Yeah.
the DM's monologue, but I might have, like, say, the harp doing something in the background. but it's
Hmm.
playing the theme from the first part to kind of remind the players like you're still in this fucking moment right here. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um or maybe like it was so impactful in that first moment. Like it's clearly, oh, this is the BEG's theme. But now we're having a heroic moment. But I have the like I have like double bass doing the BBEG's theme in the bottom while the brass are
Yeah,
doing their thing. So it's like, oh, we're having this heroic moment, but there's still like, something brewing, underneath,
yeah. It
right?
keeps
So
you
that,
rooted kind of in.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That's really cool.
So again, it's just about gleaning the most important and just telling people, hey, yeah, 5% is going to have all this from you. But that said, I'm going to be using it to manipulate your players. Uh, and yeah, so
Awesome, awesome.
it's about restraint.
Yeah,
TLDR, it's about restraint, and that's how you balance it with everything else going on at the table.
that's fantastic. I really like that answer, Aiden. That's really, really
I'm glad.
cool.
I'm
And it,
glad.
it kind of leads me into the kind of the next pillar of the conversation that, talking about using music in our games. Whether that be for a home game or an actual play,
Mhm.
do you have any advice that you want to give to somebody who's listening to this conversation right now that's saying like, "Oh, this is inspiring me to use music in my game
Mm.
to help elevate
Yeah.
the ambiance or to help make the big bads seem
Yeah.
super super cool." What
Uh,
kind of caveats do you have for using
um,
music?
yeah, 100%. So again, it's gonna sound cheesy. I'm sure there's many clickbaity TikTok videos out there that will sound the same, but
Oh yeah,
it all
why
starts
you're
with
using music wrong in your role playing game or whatever.
no, but it's more like it starts with hardware, okay, or
Mm,
software. I would say get you a Stream Deck, um, or a similar software or hard piece of hardware. I'm privileged in that I am a DJ as well
mm,
professionally. That's kind of like my side gig, but I get paid for it. That said, I get to use my DJ rig for D&D,
cool.
which is
Yeah.
awesome. But that said, it's um uh thinking of kind of harkening back to one of my points from the previous answer before the break. Music in TTRPGs is very easy to think of as soundtrack from video games and film, which I feel personally is a bit of a trap because
Hmm.
you can get caught up in it. Obviously, the pieces that are available to you are not written for your game.
Yeah.
And I've definitely fallen into this trap before, as a less seasoned game master, back in the day. But like you start to write your scenes around the music, and that that's easy to spot, right? Uh, especially if you're playing with they're gonna spot that from a mile away. Um, so it's very easy to fall in that trap. So it brings me back to hardware or software, and that it gets you something that allows you to queue up specific moments in certain tracks and certain songs, so that you're not beholden to the structure of that song or piece.
Mm,
You can literally cherry pick which moments you want to play at any given
yeah.
moment
Yeah,
during
yeah.
your game.
When they're finally vanquishing the enemy, you play the little heroic part of the song or
Exactly, exactly. And you
whatever.
don't have to
Yeah.
wait for the freaking intro. You don't have to remember time codes. You just have it queued up already, right? So that's like the technical part. In terms of like paradigms of thinking, I, you know, we're blessed in this day and age in that we have such a huge catalog of music to choose from that is genre specific, right?
Hmm.
Or even cross genre applicable. Um, that said, I would um, very much encourage my fellow GMs and players, especially like players who are like building playlists, yes, it is fun to kind of create a sonic mood board, like a playlist on Spotify. Um, but like I feel, with TTRPGs being as diverse as they are, and how like psychologically literate we are, generation, um, generations even, um,
Mhm.
I think we can go beyond that, go beyond just vibes, and think about music in terms of function. So it's like, yes, obviously, I'm gonna put the Rohirrim violin theme, right, for the heroic portion, the charging into battle slow-mo scene, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
But also think about the function of that track, right? It's it's got its focus on the solo violin. Um, the primary accompaniment is brass, and the brass aren't even overblowing, right? It's pretty mellow. And strings are there as even more sonic padding as well.
Mm.
So honestly, it's it's very introspective at the same time. So you could use that track for like a internal like if a character is monologuing, right?
Yeah.
You can use it for that.
Or like
If you
introspection, maybe
Yeah,
downtime after something big.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah,
Or
yeah.
or even like
Cool.
if say somebody cast um what's that 5e spell? Um
Fireball? Is this
yeah, fireball. I know, right?
yeah,
No,
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 I'm
no.
just
No,
kidding.
no, you play Fireball by Pitbull at
That's
that
it.
point. No, I'm thinking of Detect Thoughts,
Oh, cool. Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Obviously you can probably choose something creepy for Detect Thoughts, or you can choose something like, stealthy and slick, maybe like the Sherlock theme, something like that. But
Mhm.
imagine using the Rohirrim theme for Detect Thought. That instantly changes the flavor of it. Um music um in TTRPGs is a lot more pliable than I feel a lot of people realize, right? And we're
Mhm,
starting
mhm.
to see a little bit of a renaissance. And not to brag or anything, but I feel like I feel proud to be perhaps maybe a part of it, but yeah, not bragging.
Yeah,
Um,
I'd say you are definitely.
hey, I try.
You're
But
definitely
that's
yeah.
it. Like, I feel like we're seeing a renaissance in terms of like cross genre usage. So like we're seeing a lot more like, EDM trap stuff in fantasy. We're seeing stuff music that maybe even like 4 years ago would be like, "Oh, that's cyberpunk." But now it's like,
Mhm.
"Oh, that can be like knights doing a stealth mission into the dungeon of a castle." Right?
Yeah,
You know what
yeah,
I mean?
that's cool.
So,
Definitely.
yeah. So yeah, TLDR, music is a lot more pliable in TTRPGs than one might expect.
Yeah, I think that's really, really neat advice because I think we might when we're trying to apply music into our games, we're like you were saying, we're just gonna prescribe whatever the context was in the
Yeah,
media that it came from and be like,
exactly.
okay, in the movie, it was a heroic moment, so I have to
Yeah,
use it in a heroic moment.
yeah,
So I really,
exactly.
really like that advice of like, no, think about how it feels, what
Yeah,
the
like
like
strip it
undertones
down to
are.
its bare parts, its bare constituent, like
Yeah,
uh feeling, and then build up from there and see if it applies anywhere else. Right?
definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
Speaking of kind of the foundation and the basis of sound and music. I often, when I talk about music, because I'm not really trained in any of this, ambient sounds and music to me live in the same like file folder in my brain.
Mhm.
I'd love to hear what your thoughts are with regards to ambient noise versus music. How do they interplay? Do they synergize? Are they opposites? Like well, how does that make you feel
Yeah,
when I say that they
yeah.
live in the same folder, basically?
Honestly, I know I've been the trend of my answers this entire interview has been long answer, and I give the TLDR. I'm going to give the TLDR first. I ain't mad at that.
Okay, okay, good.
Not
I'm glad.
anymore, at least. Obviously, as a burgeoning musician back in the day, I, was like, no, music is music, and then sound, right? But
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
having
definitely.
done this for so long, and also doing sound design work for so long, like the line is not there. More often than not, especially now that we're getting more like niche and niche with our genres, with our narrative choices, with the music requests. Um, More often than not, you're going to commission somebody, and they're probably going to be pulling sounds and samples from places you wouldn't expect. Like, could constantly use like ambient sound and as samples, and
Hmm.
then I process it to fit the music, or the other way around.
Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
of course, have your pure. I'll do you. Not do you one better is not quite the right like phrase, but you get what I mean. But so I'll do you one better, and that is my advice to you specifically, is
Yeah, please.
have your one unified folder, and then keep that, but also like have two folders that are split between sound and
Hmm,
music,
hmm.
and then that way, obviously you're already thinking of sound and music together, which means that you already kind of you've already taken that next step. You know the function sound and music can have, kind of intertwine with one another, and you'd be able to split that apart. For everyone
Yeah.
else listening that this is kind of new to, um, I would do the opposite. Start with sound and music kind of in separate folders, and then you can start to experiment with, pairings. So for example, it's like, oh, I got this one Viking sounding track, right? It's got like throat singing, it's got the hurdy-gurdy, it's got the war horns, it's got the
Hmm.
the dune female vocals in there, right? You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Right? And then I've got this ambient sound of just waves crashing. That's an instant soundscape right there, baby.
Hmm,
Right?
hmm.
And then anyone in listening thinking about getting into audio production or like music composition, right? Then you start thinking, oh, what if I process the ocean waves and start having that, like flip the phasing of it and start having that interact with the throat singing. Oh, mind blown, right?
Cool.
That's
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I
that's
see where
that's
you're going with
that's
this.
that's Aesir magic right there. That's an incantation sound right there, baby.
That's it.
Um,
That's it. I love
right.
it.
So
I love
so
it.
yeah, I would say yeah. Um, Not mad at,
Okay. I
thinking of
mean,
those
you
2 things
can
together.
be. Just because you're on my show doesn't mean you're not
No,
allowed to
no,
be
no,
mad at
I
me.
genuinely am not, because
Okay,
again,
okay, good.
the 2 are intertwined. You can use one in the other and the other and the other and the other. Eh. And I
Yeah,
call
yeah,
myself a
we
writer.
all understand.
Um,
Um, all right, one last question for you,
yeah,
Aiden, specifically about using music at a table with players. Um, And this one might be, I think it's definitely something that's going to differ from table to table,
mhm,
like all advice
yeah,
should. We should always consider that. But not too long ago, Kadiosaurus joined me on the show to talk about
amazing.
advice and recommendations on running games for players who have ADHD or other
Right,
neurodivergencies.
right,
Um, and one thing that did come up during our conversation was that music in a game
mhm,
can have a challenging, like it can be a challenge for
yes,
players who are
yes,
neurodivergent because
yes,
it takes them away from the game and it
yes,
distracts. And
yes,
every person is different, of course, but in most circumstances, it can create a barrier for
yes,
players.
yes.
With that in mind, what are your thoughts on the use of music and it being a distraction for players? And what kind of advice do you have to try and mitigate those risks?
Um, hold on. 6 words. You need to get better music. Okay. I'm not trying to be like snarky or anything. Um, what I mean by that is 100%. I have done commissions where they were wanting something that was not distracting at all. I've
Mhm.
been at tables where I, as the DM, was asked to turn off the music because it was distracting, or a fellow player asked the GM to turn off the music because it was distracting. And so, I totally get it. I totally understand. So again, as a seasoned musician, I ain't mad. Um, what I can, if there's any advice I can impart, and it would be this. Um, Again, we have a wide catalog of both existing works and
Mhm.
artists that are willing to work with you. For those kinds of tables where the music can become incredibly distracting and um, unimmersive for either the entire table or particular players, um, it is then um, it's a fun challenge for me personally as the DM if I get this. It becomes the imperative to then source and or sound, preferably both,
Mhm.
um, that doesn't trigger them in that way, but is still noticeable to the people that don't get triggered so that they can enjoy that added immersion,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So what I mean by this is, for example, the um, any of the soundtrack from Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Elden Ring, right? Obviously, there's going to be certain tracks that melody driven, more raucous, more rambunctious, right?
Mhm.
But there are other tracks, especially in Bloodborne, that are just subtle. It almost feels like just noise, but it's there. And honestly, if you turn that shit way down on a very good set of speakers or headphones, right? And like barely any bass is rumbling, from my experience using this
Mhm.
in horror adventures,
Yeah.
or even just not even horror, but just like a tense political moment, right? See, cross function. Um,
Yeah, definitely.
but using it in that way, from my experience, anecdotal at best, but that said, the people that had the concerns about the music being distracting didn't even notice it. But the people that were looking for that were they could hear it, they could feel
Mhm.
it. One of these games was a game that I was playing in person, and I had actual speakers with giant subwoofers, and I turned it so low that it was just the subwoofers that were rumbling, and that just
Cool.
added
Yeah.
to the tactile feel. But it wasn't it wasn't turning that switch on for the particular like neurodivergent people that I was playing with, that oh shit, this is music and I'm being taken out. It was just like a physical, it became physical and not auditory, right?
Yeah,
So
that's
it
neat.
is up to you as DM, GM, producer, whatever, to then either experiment with consent, of course, but experiment and find ways to still provide that level of immersion for players that want it. Um, and not, kind of take the fun away from the people that, it can detract the game
Yeah.
away from. Right? Does
Solid
that make sense?
advice. Very solid. Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
definitely. And I think you're right. Every table is different. Every group is different. So getting that consent to experiment a little bit and to try different soundtracks and say like you let me know if this is pulling you out.
Yep.
Um until you
And when you
can
can't find
start.
something, just commission some.
Well, yeah, I mean that's certainly a solution, I think, because one of
Yep.
the one of the big issues that I've had at my table is that as soon as somebody recognizes the music that I'm playing,
Hmm.
they're out of there.
Yeah.
They're out of there. So I have to go super deep cut stuff that no one's ever gonna know because if they recognize like, oh, and my wife has this memory for things sometimes where she's like,
Mhm.
that's that scene in Pirates of the Caribbean #4 that nobody's
Mhm.
seen, but I know, and
Mhm.
it's like
Mhm.
that one moment, I'm out of the game now. I'm with
Yep.
Johnny Depp.
Yep.
Sorry, the game's
Yep.
over.
Yep. Yep. Oh yeah.
So you really need to make sure that, for me anyway, that I'm not using something that's recognizable. And if it's commissioned, it's going to be an original piece. So there's no way that that's
Exactly.
going to happen.
Yeah. And that's where the hardware slash software comes into play. If you have everything queued up, oh, somebody recognizes something, boop, different queue. You
Different
instantly
cue.
switch. You know what I'm saying?
Definitely, definitely. Sweet. So I'm looking at the clock and I have a couple more questions for you, Aiden,
Yeah.
in the last pillar of our conversation. So
Yeah. Go for it.
let's try to squeeze through those. And here we're talking about resources and advice for getting into this kind of stuff,
Hmm.
tools and whatnot. And you mentioned a few already. Maybe I'll start, since we're already talking about advice for using music in a game as a game
Yeah.
master. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the applications and websites that exist
Hmm.
for kind of creating these scapes of sound, like
Hmm.
Sirenscape being one, Pocket
Hmm.
Bard. I'm a big fan of Pocket Bard. We had them on the show not too
Hmm.
long ago.
Hmm. Hmm.
Alex and Chase are awesome.
Yeah.
Soundtail, all those apps that like kind of like you press play and it kind of
Hmm.
like goes in the background.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the use of those kinds of like looping
Use them.
systems?
Use
Yeah,
them.
sweet.
I mean, as I'm privileged being a musician, right? That I can think of such things as just another tool in the toolbox. Other people might not be so privileged, and that's the only thing that they can do or have the time to learn to do. It's totally valid. Um, but for the people that have the time or the resources, um, those things are goaded. Love Sirenscape,
Mhm.
love Pocket Bard, um, uh, sound libraries. If you have the to pay for them, 100% go for them. It's so for example, like Epidemic Sound, or Artlist IO, um, or even Epic Sound. Um, those are resources that composers and producers use to put in our music and
Mhm.
sound design as well. So 100% use those. Use those. Use the loops. Use everything at your disposal, and find a system that works for you to kind of streamline everything so it's right there at your fingertips. Um, yeah, yeah.
Well,
Honestly, I
yeah,
have no gripe with anything. The only gripe I have is don't use AI. That's
yeah.
it. Um, at least until the ethics are sorted out.
That's it,
Um,
definitely,
yeah.
definitely. And
Um,
as far as people, let's say, someone is they like being the DJ at the table when they're playing. They're using these apps.
mhm.
They want to dip their toes and start perhaps making their own original compositions
Yes.
for their games. What would be kind of like baby's first mixing board, or what the software that you would
Yeah,
recommend to
100%.
people?
Obviously for any kind of soundboard, um, you know, uh, I, I know our crowd and threads. A lot of us are streamers, content creators of some kind. So
Hmm.
a lot of us might have a Stream Deck already. Don't have one. That's the one I would recommend. It's by Steam, I believe. It's literally a piece of hardware and it has all the buttons and there's a software that goes with it and you preload it with the sounds and you can literally just like
Cool.
have the
Yeah.
sounds at your fingertips. You can operate it off of the software as well, I believe. Um, and it's very helpful. Something similar would be like Voice Mod, which is an app you can literally change your voice, hence, but also it has to upload sounds to have at your fingertips as well. I
Awesome.
would say start with that. For anybody in who is like interested in like the more DJ portion, like mixing tracks and stuff, because that's also very valid, and that's something I'm also trying to discover as well. Um, so, so we can have like sessions, different tracks, different pieces. Um, Obviously, Box and Serato Itch are going to be the industry mainstays for DJs. You don't have to get the hardware. You don't have to get a mix deck if you don't want to. But if you
Yeah,
do,
yeah.
by all means, uh, Panasonic is going to be your best bet. You know, it doesn't matter if you get the cheapest one or the most expensive one, it's going to be viable. Um, and in terms of like getting into um, production and or composition, um, Reaper is a very good first step for like just audio recording and like getting your toes wet with like plugins and
Hmm.
basic sort of flowchart functionality, stuff like that, and different UIs. That's very good. Reaper and Audacity are going to be your best bet. Audacity, I would say, is kind of like the half step up from Reaper. Both of those are free, so yay.
Yeah,
And then
definitely.
I believe anyone that owns a Apple that's oh no, both iOS and Mac OS have access now, but GarageBand should come preloaded into all Apple products. So play around with GarageBand. They even I don't believe you need to buy the expanded like sound library anymore. So I may be wrong. Don't quote me on it. But that said, if you have GarageBand, play around with GarageBand. And then obviously for Mac, the next step up is going to be Logic Pro. Um, and that's also available on iOS as well. And very powerful. That's what I use.
Yeah,
And that
awesome.
starts to allow you to add different sound libraries. Like maybe you already had a sound library, but it has integration with Logic Pro. On
So
the
cool.
Windows side, you're going to want to look at again, next step up is so on a same ish level of Logic, going to be wanting to look at uh, FL Studio. Probably heard of it if you're into EDM. Um, and then Pro Tools, which is kind of that's the same level as Logic. Pro Tools is like the industry standard, and it's very good for live instruments. So yeah,
Cool.
that's kind of like your
Yeah.
roadmap on how to get into audio production and music composition, not just in TTRPGs, honestly.
Yeah,
And the
yeah,
skills you
sounds
learn
like.
here are going to be applicable in like TV, film, radio. Like,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that sounds like a fantastic roadmap. So y'all can credit Aiden for his advice when, when you make it big. Say it was all thanks to Aiden
hey,
and
hey,
his
Sensei
advice.
got you. Okay, I'm just listening out for my name at your Oscar or Oscar acceptance speech, and yeah, okay,
That's it.
I'll
That's
be
the
crying happy
expectation.
tears at my TV. Okay,
Love it. I love it. So I think that brings us to almost the end of the show.
Mm,
We're gonna, just take a little break. We'll see the regular listeners of the show in a few minutes. We're just gonna scurry over into the Patreon exclusive VIP tent over to the side there. I don't know if you can see it, Aiden. It's got the
oh
nice like red
wow,
wind, yeah, the red tarp and
yeah,
the flag.
that's you went all out. Damn. Okay,
Yeah, oh
okay.
yeah, we gotta
Oh,
go big. Gotta go big.
this didn't take hold. This took platinum coins.
So let's scurry on in there, and in this part of the show, Aiden, we tend to talk about. I mean, we're gonna really shift gears here.
Yeah.
Lately, we've been talking about game prep, like
Yep.
preparing for our game.
Yeah.
And something that never fails to impress me is how different every game master prepares for their game because of the things that they kind of prioritize. So
Right.
I would love to know, when you do game prep,
Yeah.
what's something that really works for you that like allows you to be ready to have a game that you feel like confident in running.
So, almost all my games are sandbox games.
Okay,
Um,
cool.
almost none of them follow a main storyline because the kind of people that I play with tend to get distracted. So, with that said, Typically what I do, and this applies to whenever I'm writing novels or writing comics, it's the same thing. I start with world building and I built the world. And I have like a wiki page for myself. And I just have that at my fingertips. So it doesn't matter what the players do, where they go, what they say. I always have an answer to something. So, TLDR, always have an answer for something. And then I know at the beginning of the podcast, I guess we're in the in the Patreon portion now.
That's it.
So
Yeah,
if you heard the main part of this podcast, this episode, then I'll harken back to that. Um, so, uh, yeah, like, you know how I said I don't have any improv skills? Uh, it's kind of a half truth, half lie. Uh, yes, I can improv, but I can improv in character. I can't really improv like wisdom in real life. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So, all that to say, like, yeah, I just world build and then always have an answer for something. And then yeah, and then I go into a game pretty much unprepared except for my world document, and I just improv my way through my people's shenanigans.
I like that answer a lot. It is very reminiscent actually of how I like to prepare. Like
Mhm.
I am a little bit more narrative focused. My players tend to want a story
Yeah,
in the game that we're playing,
yeah.
and they're happy to jump on like small train tracks that lead them to the next story event if you
Mhm.
would.
Yeah.
But they also, I get the impression anyway, no one's ever come out and told me, but I get the impression that they really like the lore of the world
Mhm.
that they're playing in.
Mhm.
And when they're given the opportunity to explore something that looks new or interesting or
Mhm.
intriguing about the
Mhm.
factions at play, they jump on it all the time. So
Exactly.
the only way for me to be able to spout out stuff is to prepare the world, to
Yep.
prepare the sandbox, make the sandbox interesting so they go
Mhm.
and grab the shiny things in the
Exactly.
sandbox, like
Exactly. Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Exactly my philosophy. And even when I do like hooks to get people to play, it's never like, "Oh, you are a group of blah and blah happens, so you have been hired to do blah." Like it's never that. It's
Mhm.
always imagine X meets Y. There it is. You interested?
Mhm.
Cool. Yeah. All right, let's go. You know? And so,
Yeah,
for
it's
example, like I'm currently on a little bit of a dry break with DMing right now just because I'm so freaking busy. But not to plug anything, but like for example, my novel. The main prompt was imagine if what was it, Qin Dynasty and you know the an alliance between the Celts and the Vikings
Hmm,
went to war.
cool.
That's it. That's the hook, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Same
yeah.
thing with with the comic book that I'm working on, which that I should be I should be plugging more on social media anyway. But it's like imagine Ultraman meets Iron Man.
Sweet. Yeah,
That's it. That's the hook. Like so it's
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
I go off of like those kinds of like worldy hooks, flavor hooks, as opposed to plot hooks. And yeah, I've been lucky so far that enough people have been interested to
Yeah.
to play.
Well, and I find that when you do something like that, when you are the like arbiter of this interesting new world, it's fun. It's
Yeah.
fun to explore that world together, and to
Mhm.
kind of create it collectively.
Yeah,
Um,
100%.
yeah, it can be a blast, and you've got me sold on on your Celts versus Qin
Oh,
Dynasty. That
thank
sounds
you.
really cool.
Yeah, that one is
um,
it's a doozy.
yeah, yeah, I'm sure that's going to be a challenge, but it sounds really, really fascinating. Now you said you haven't had your game master hat in a while. So let's
Hmm.
create a hypothetical situation and I'd love to hear,
Sure.
your thought process.
Yeah.
Let's say you rent a cabin with your friends
Hmm.
for a weekend. The
Hmm.
kids are there's babysitters with the kids. You don't
Yeah.
have to worry about them. It's
Yeah.
just you and a group of your friends
Yeah.
for the weekend, and you're having dinner Friday night, and someone's like, "Hey, Aiden, like you play these tabletop games.
Hmm.
Why don't you run us an adventure tonight?"
Bet.
And so while everyone's doing the dishes and getting like the kitchen ready and clean,
Yeah.
what's going on in your head to prepare a third like let's say you have 30 minutes. What are you prioritizing? What are you
Um.
recycling maybe to make a fun game for your
Yeah.
table? And what system are you using?
Um. I use Old Faithful. I use 5e. Um.
Nice.
Especially if in this scenario sounds like they've never played TTRPGs because they're asking me
It,
about TTRPGs,
yeah, yeah.
right?
Let's say
So if they're
they don't play.
newbies, then I'm probably going to be running 5e. If they're not, then I might be running Pathfinder 2e or maybe even doing some VTM. Uh, we like some horny vampires sometimes. That
Cool. Yeah.
said, or I might do sagas, or I'm actually writing my own TTRPGs. Don't hush hush, right now.
Nice,
But like,
nice, nice.
if I had a bunch of like comic book nerds, then I might do something superheroes with that. Either way, anyway, going back to like 5e, okay? So I'm
Hmm.
probably gonna be doing 5e for this hypothetical. Um, and again, hypothetical, they're my friends, so I'm probably gonna know them pretty well to maybe an acquaintance or two. Either way, we're probably gonna know each other in some way, form, or another on social media. I'm gonna be spending that first 5 minutes Facebook stalking them. Oh, I just aged myself. TikTok stalking them. Instagram stalking them. Oh, god damn it.
It's okay. That's my go-to app to
I know,
stalk
right? I
people.
know,
So
right? But yeah. So anyway, I'm gonna be trolling through the socials, and I'm gonna be looking at stuff that they've mentioned, like media they've consumed, to kind of get a profile on. Okay, this is the kind of stuff that they've consumed. So I'm definitely going to incorporate some kind of element from those. So if it's like, again, if it's mostly superheroes, we'll do superheroes. If it's mostly like, fantasy stuff, fantasy, sci-fi, whatever. Right.
hmm
Then I'm going to do a twist. Right. And that twist is probably going to take me the next like 10 minutes. So we're at 15 minutes now. But that 10 minutes is kind of, that's the, on the pitch level, it's the meets
hmm
right? I need to think of the
Okay. Yeah.
right?
What's the other
So
piece? Yeah.
exactly. So for example, like if it's like, okay, they mostly do superheroes, great. Okay, you can all play superheroes, but um we might be doing like um superhero dark ages kind of thing, you know? So instantly transported into medieval times, that kind of thing. Or uh uh if they're mostly into fantasy, then you might do like fantasy, but like there's like old, like ancient ruins that are actually very technologically advanced. You know what I
hmm
mean? Right? They're
Sweet.
mixing some
Yeah.
sci-fi in there. Or if they're into sci-fi, oh, okay, cool. Doing some of the stuff that current Star Wars is kind of doing, but like, yes, this is a sci-fi world. There's laser, like laser swords, yada yada, and spaceship, blah 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 blah. But then, boom, ancient eldritch god that imbues magical abilities
hmm
to people, that kind of thing. So I'm thinking
Cool.
of the
Yeah.
twist. Now I have 15 minutes left to kind of build a uh, core city, kingdom, or planet system, spread out as far as I can from there. Because if we're just running one session, we're probably not going to explore more than that. But yeah, so I just start from the core. If it's a city, then New York, San Francisco, or it's like a Gotham or something like that, and then just kind of build out from there. Um, that's probably going to take me about 5 minutes, right? And then next 5 minutes is going to be like key people, right? Um, Mayor or king or duke or whatever, whoever the head honcho is, medieval place, and then or maybe like the viceroy or senator, system lord in
Yeah.
that planet, that kind of thing. and they just kind of populate, right? Now I've got my location, I've got my people, right? And then I think of some vague hook, right? Harkening back to the media that they consume. So, thinking about like, oh, out of all the superhero stuff, maybe they, like, they're more Marvel than DC. Great.
Hmm.
Let's run a let's run a detective murder mystery. Let's do a little bit of Batman, but they're obviously going to make Marvel-like characters. So let's throw them in Gotham. You know what I mean? Right? Or,
Cool. Yeah.
like if they're
Yeah. Yeah.
like, oh, they fantasy stuff, they mostly consume thrones. Great, let's make it Lord of the Rings. Right? There's a huge MacGuffin you got to find. That kind of thing.
Yeah. I
Sci-fi,
love it.
it's like they're mostly Star Wars. Let's do Star Trek. You're gotta go on peacekeeping, peacekeeping mission. Or if they're mostly Trekkies, then Star Wars. You're either all smugglers and you have to weather a intergalactic war, or et cetera, et cetera. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
yeah, and then they're done with dishes. Sit down. We begin.
Very nice. That's cool. I really like the research thing. I don't think anyone said that yet.
Uh-huh.
Like, stalking the people to get insights. And I think
Yeah.
that's a perfectly valid thing to do, right? You play to your audience,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
give them
Yep.
the game they want.
Yeah.
And that's a fantastic way to do that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really like that.
Hey, the uh, I've never stalked anyone on social media, but like the skill is there just because our generation was raised on social media. So we might as well use that skill set for something that's not creepy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just
Yeah,
use it
yeah.
for
And
something fun.
honestly, it's not you don't have to look too hard, I think. People are gonna be posting about, oh, I just watched House of
Well,
Dragon last night or whatever. Like
exactly.
they're gonna
Exactly.
say it out loud. They're gonna
Exactly.
they're gonna put it out there for you
I
to
am
be
I
able
am privileged that like all my friends are nerds, so it's very easy.
to
But for the people that might not have friends that are that nerdy, like again, like if they're like super into football, for example, run Blood Bowl for them. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Boom, done.
Seriously,
Yeah.
seriously. Or even like having a scene that is something that they can associate themselves with. Like
Yeah.
you start the adventure off, maybe you're running one of these MacGuffins and it's set
Hmm.
in like lately I'm on a big kick of like Tales from the Loop, Kids with
Hmm.
Brooms, or Kids with
Hmm.
Bikes, like those
Yeah.
kinds
Yeah.
of games.
Yeah.
It's like have a scene at the high school and they're
Yeah.
watching football. And
Yeah.
that's like the backdrop
Yeah.
to them
Exactly.
starting their mission. Put
Exactly.
them in a scenario that they can have common ground with
Yeah.
before you rock them completely
Yeah.
out and put
Exactly.
them in
Give
front
them
of a
some agency
Eldritch.
in the first, like in the onset. Like I've run a couple of games professionally for like corporate events, like team building events, and
Cool, yeah.
I would always just incorporate like it's mostly for like sales teams, right? I would incorporate whatever the fuck they were selling. Like,
Mm,
oh, you sell roofs, then you guys are a band of merchants, and it gives them something to tether to,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
That kind of
That's
thing.
so funny. Please tell me that's a real example that you had like a bunch of like roof tile salesmen or something.
They sold roofs, but they also sold like windows, like
Okay,
energy
okay.
efficient windows. So I actually had them as like I legit had them as window salesmen. Uh, like
I love that
selling
so
like
much.
stick windows,
Yeah,
because it was a medieval setting. But I had stick windows, and
that's
they
perfect.
just were running a caravan and make a pit stop at and they were all like all bros, so they're just like, oh, can we like go to the brothel? I'm like, yeah, great, cool, roll constitution.
That's fantastic. Oh man, I
uh,
love it. I love it. Well, I think that does take us to the end of the show, Aiden. So why don't we scurry on back to the rest of the listeners?
yes, yes, let's not
So
leave them in the lurch.
yeah, yeah. So we're back. Thanks for waiting on us, friends. So Aiden, the show's almost at a close. I think I'm gonna pass you the microphone here and give you the opportunity now to just give us any parting words, final thoughts you have as it pertains to music in tabletop role playing games. And then
Yeah.
once you're done, telling us about that, why don't you tell us all about the fantastic projects that you have that you're working on, the
100%.
comics and the book that you're writing, and all of that good stuff,
Awesome.
where
Awesome.
people
Yeah.
can hire you to write music for
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
games.
Hey, I appreciate it. Parting words. So again, the theme of the day is TLDR, brought to you by um, um anyway, so yes, the main takeaway I think from anything that I said, I feel would be just word for word, music is very pliable. Um, much more so, one would think, especially in TTRPGs. Um, you know, there's film and video game music where it's scored to moment or it's scored to cue, and it's very rigid, surprisingly. In TTRPGs, it's not so much so. Because the main meat of the storytelling is not going to be in music, it's going to be in at the table. And the music, whether you source it, pre-written, pre-existing from libraries, from open source, from streaming services, whatever, right? Or if you commission it, the main thing is to have that music um, complement your game, your table, not
Hmm.
the other way around. If you ever find yourself in that situation, that composer needs an ego check. Um, that said, um, uh, when it comes to music, I know it can feel daunting to get into either using it or even making it. Honestly, in the very wise words of one samurai, right? I can't even remember it right now. Paraphrasing, but best way to begin is by beginning, and the best way to learn is by starting. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
um, but that, um, just do it, man. Just start. Just download the software, find the free thing, and do it. Just I'm one of you. I GM, I DM, I write. I know no one can deny for a fact that they don't get burnout. You're going to get burnout. So in the burnout moment, from game planning, go make some music. Go source some sounds. Go download the software. Right.
Yeah,
Take your
yeah,
mind
yeah.
off of the one thing. And if you get burnt out on the music, then fucking go back to writing. Like you know. Um, so yeah. I think again that was not very TLDR, but you know that's my parting words of advice to everyone listening, I think.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that's fantastic advice. And if people wanted to come find you,
yeah,
hire you to make a song for them, uh, or some of the projects you've got cooking, where can people do that, find that,
yeah,
buy that,
100%.
follow you, all that good
Um,
stuff?
well, so I am available for hire, not to toot my own horn, but I've been literally given a platform right now, so I will take advantage of it. So that's it. Um, I'm most active right now on Threads, kind of coming back to TikTok. But in terms of actually reaching out, probably DMs on Instagram. Um, I do have my price lists um, updated on those places, so I do post them from time to time, repost them, or sometimes I pin them as well. But just in case it gets buried, feel free to shoot me a DM and kind of ask. Um, I do have links on all my socials that go to my link tree, and one of the first links is going to be like um, a commission, like informational request form. So you can, it's very self-explanatory. You can fill that, and then I will shoot you an email to kind of, or if you give me your Discord handle, I'll add you as a friend and DM you, and then we can kind of talk things through. Um, that said, yeah, in terms of uh, where to find my work, I do have a website. It's in the link tree, but also, if you have a good memory and you're listening to it, aiden.com. It's not quite up to date yet because I am scatterbrain, so I forget to update it, but it's got a lot of stuff from some of the previous years on there. But there will be more uh, from the last couple of years that will be added soon. Hopefully. Um, that said, I do upload a lot of my more recent stuff, like little snippets on Threads and Instagram. So if you're not following already, follow. And you might see a video or two pop up every now and then with snippets of my more updated work. Um, and yeah, and in terms of like projects that I'm currently doing, obviously I'm still uh I don't really do like solo projects with music. I enjoy being behind the scenes, so I don't really have those on the music front. But that said, um I am uh co-creating a comic book series. Um, in fact, it's 3 series and counting, but my team is comprised of a group of best friends from high school. So this is a 15-year project in the making.
Wow,
And it
impressive.
is, yeah, it is a Asian American superhero world. And we kind of took um, the literature that is American tokusatsu. Think, Voltron, think Power Rangers, all that. And we're saying, listen, we love these. These are goated, but they were also not written by Asians. So let's show y'all how it's really done.
Awesome.
And so we're bringing that, sort of like cultural perspective to it as well. It's gonna be called issue one is, um, uh, we're probably gonna be kickstarting this in November of 24, but we are bringing some prototypes to Comic Con this year in
Cool.
July. Yeah. Issue one is gonna be the series is gonna be called Generation of Heroes, and issue one is what we're gonna be uh gearing to release at the end of this year. And yeah, so look out for us. Look out for social. Got cover art. We've got amazing artists on the team. And yeah, it's amazing. Um, and if you do follow me on Threads, I'm writing a novel as well. And that one was meant to be coming out in 2024, but it's taking a lot longer than I thought it'd be. So it's probably gonna be next year. That said, it's called The Ghost of Cald Bay. That is the Vikings meets Qin Dynasty, uh, epic fantasy romp. Um, yeah, it's also co-created by the same co-creator I have with the comic book. So expect lots of action, expect lots of cultural nuance and commentary, but ultimately it's going to be fun. And yeah, those are kind of the things that.
Sweet. That sounds really awesome. So yeah, I'm gonna do my best to link up a lot of what Aiden mentioned in the show notes for today's episode. So the link tree, uh, Aiden's threads
Mhm.
threads page, TikTok page, that kind of stuff you'll be able to find
Appreciate
in
it.
the
Thank you
show
so
notes.
much.
And yeah, definitely go check it out. That comic sounds cool. Best of luck with Comic Con. I think that's a fantastic idea to kind of
Yeah,
promote it in that sense. And yeah, otherwise, thanks for being here, Aiden. It's been a fantastic
been a pleasure.
time
Thank you so much for
chatting.
having me.
Yeah, yeah, very insightful. I hope everybody listening had the opportunity to learn something new as it pertains to music in role-playing games. I know that I sure did. If you wanted to spread the good word of Roleplay Chat, I will be forever in your debt. Don't forget to review the show 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. And if you wanted to reach out to me, you can do that in all the usual places. That's roll_play_chat, or you could contact me by email if you don't want to be limited to a character limit at contact@roleplaychat@gmail.com. Aiden, thank you once again for being here to talk
Thank
to me
you.
and the
Yeah, it's my
chat.
pleasure.
Yeah, yeah, it's been a blast. And with that, let's call it a chat. Thanks for making it all the way to the end of today's episode, friends. If you made it all the way here, you are one of the true MVPs of the Roleplay Chat audience. The other MVPs of the Roleplay Chat audience are the Patreon subscribers who are supporting me through their subscription on Patreon. I'd like to thank Domil's Wondrous Works and Jason over at Shadowmane. Thanks to the two of you for supporting me. Your support allows me to continue to make this show. If you wanted to join them, you're welcome to do so by going onto Patreon and looking for Roleplay Chat. There's also a link down in the show notes. There you can subscribe to the show, where you can get access to the episodes as soon as they're done, as well as extended episodes depending on the tier that you subscribe to. You can also support the show without spending money. You can do that by reviewing the show, spreading the good word, and sharing the show with your friends. If you do that, it really helps to broaden the reach of Roleplay Chat. Recommendations, personal recommendations, and word of mouth really are one of the number one ways for the podcast to be discovered. Also, if you're looking to buy some new tabletop RPG stuff, like dice, miniatures, or new games and rules and supplements, the show notes have links to affiliate links. So if you were to buy things using those affiliate links, for instance, the indie showcase that was spotlighted in today's episode, you can purchase it there, sometimes at a discount too, depending on the link, and a small kickback comes back to me. So yeah, check all that stuff out. The show notes has a handful of links there, things like Hero Forge, Drive-Thru-RPG, some awesome dice makers and things like of that nature. So go check it out, and yeah. Thanks again for making it all the way here, and one last thank you to Alex and Chase over at Pocket Bard for allowing me to use their music for the intro and outro of Roleplay Chat.